If you care about how people actually survived when cities collapsed under pressure, subscribe to this channel now and share it with someone who takes history seriously. This isn't entertainment history. This is operational history. The kind that decided who lived, who vanished, and who got out when modern cities turned hostile. Let me open with a truth most documentaries skip. Cities do not fail evenly. When political order collapses or bombs fall, danger concentrates around predictable points. Roads, checkpoints, stations, bridges, and government buildings. Historically, survival depended on understanding what lay beneath, behind, and between those visible systems. That is what this guide is about. Forgotten urban escape routes, not in theory, but in practice, as they were used during real historical crises. Why cities quietly preserve escape routes long after people forget them. Urban escape routes rarely disappear. They are buried, sealed, or repurposed, but they almost never cease to exist. Sewer lines, service corridors, abandoned rail spurs, drainage culverts, utility tunnels, and old freight basements survive regime changes, wars, and urban renewal because tearing them out is expensive and disruptive. During crises, these forgotten spaces re-emerge as lifelines. In wartime cities, authorities focus on controlling movement at street level. Historically, that left underground and interstitial spaces under-policed or ignored. Survivors exploited this blind spot. The lesson is not romantic, it is structural. City security systems are designed for visibility and flow control, not for hidden continuity. During the bombing of London in World War II, civilians didn't rely only on shelters. Many used the underground not simply as refuge, but as a movement network when surface travel became, well, lethal. Sections of the system allowed people to cross neighbourhoods without exposure, while disused tunnels and service corridors enabled quiet relocation away from targeted zones. In some boroughs, utility workers quietly guided families through maintenance passages known only to staff. The practical takeaway is this. Transport infrastructure always has layers the public never sees. Modern cities still retain maintenance-only corridors, emergency cross-passages, and access shafts. Learning where transport lines intersect with older infrastructure can reveal paths that bypass surface choke points entirely. One of the most sobering examples comes from occupied Warsaw during World War II. When resistance fighters and civilians were hunted street by street, sewer networks became escape arteries. These were not clean, navigable tunnels. They were hazardous, disorienting, and honestly, deadly to the unprepared. But they worked because occupying forces did not understand the system well enough to seal it comprehensively. What mattered was preparation. Survivors mapped routes in advance, marked turns, established timing protocols, and assigned guides who memorized layouts by touch and sound. The modern application is clear. Survival through hidden infrastructure requires rehearsal, not improvisation. Anyone studying urban survival today should understand that knowing where an access point exists is meaningless without knowing where it leads, how long traversal takes, and what conditions exist inside. Why Paris's underground quietly resisted centuries of control. Paris offers a different lesson. Beneath the city lies a labyrinth originally created for quarrying stone, later repurposed for storage, transport, resistance activity and concealment. During multiple crises, from revolutions to occupations, these spaces allowed people to move, hide and stage activity undetected. Authorities periodically attempted to map and seal them, but the sheer scale defeated centralized control. The enduring principle here is redundancy. Cities built over centuries develop overlapping underground layers created by different eras with different logic. Security systems struggle to dominate spaces that evolved without unified planning. For modern learners, this reinforces the importance of historical maps. Studying old city plans often reveals forgotten corridors still physically present beneath modern streets. During the Cold War, Berlin really became a showcase for what you might call vertical escape thinking. In that divided city, escape routes weren't just about moving across the ground. They were vertical as well. People found their way out through basements, attics, and, well, all sorts of building-to-building connections. Of course, you've probably heard about the tunnels that crossed borders underground, but what's less known are those escape paths that ran through shared walls, loft spaces, and service ducts between neighbouring buildings. The thing is, buildings that were designed for density, perhaps unintentionally, created these whole ecosystems for escape. And, you know, all of this teaches us a crucial urban survival concept. Escape routes actually exist in 3 dimensions. If you only look at street level, you might miss how the city really connects. In any dense city, it's important to examine how structures link up above and below ground. Things like fire escapes, shared utility chases, roof access points, and basement interconnections. They often form these unplanned networks, quietly bypassing surveillance. So, how do you actually apply all this knowledge in a realistic way today? Well, the purpose of studying these historical routes isn't about, some fantasy planning. It's really about awareness. Start by getting to know your city's age layers. Typically, older districts contain a much deeper redundancy. Take some time to study historical maps alongside modern ones. Look for those mismatches where old infrastructure is more likely buried than removed. And pay attention to things like service access doors, utility markings, and even subtle elevation changes. These often hint at underlying structures. Equally important, though, is restraint. Historical survivors, they moved quietly at off hours and kept their visibility to a minimum. They avoided overusing routes, always understanding that discovery meant closure. The big lesson for modern preparedness is truly discretion and redundancy. One route, honestly, is not a plan. Multiple partial routes are. So, why do forgotten routes still matter in the modern city? Surveillance has certainly improved, but, complexity has increased even faster. Cities today are denser, layered with telecommunications, power infrastructure, drainage systems, and transit expansions, all built atop older systems. And, in a crisis, centralized control can still be overwhelmed. History continues to show that survival favors those who really understand how cities function beneath the surface narrative. If this guide has sharpened how you see urban history and survival, do consider subscribing to this channel and sharing this video with someone who studies cities seriously. This channel exists to preserve the operational knowledge that history almost lost, and, well, to make sure it isn't forgotten again.